Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the new Battle Brother rule and the allied attachment from the upcoming Arcs of Omen expansion. I'm going to highlight the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of these new rules, and we will be discussing what they mean for the Warhammer 40k meta. And so without further ado, let's crack on with today's video and dive straight into this. So the first thing we're going to do is go over what the hell the new rules even are. What are Battle Brothers and allied detachments? Basically, if you're going to be running one of the new Arcs of Omen detachments, then you'll be able to ally in units from other factions to support your army. Right now, we don't have all of the details of the different factions that you will be able to ally together, but Games Workshop has given us some examples. If you take an Imperium Arcs of Omen detachment, you will be able to include an Agents of the Imperium Auxiliary Support or Patrol detachment, or you'll be able to take an Imperial Knight Super Heavy Auxiliary detachment, but it will be only able to contain one Free Blade unit. On top of this, you could also take a Votann Patrol detachment, which is really interesting. If you're running Genes to the Cult, you could include one Brood Brothers Patrol, Auxiliary Support, or Super Heavy Auxiliary detachment as an allied detachment. That's right, the Four-Armed Boys are going to be bringing some Bane Blades along to support their uprising in the Day of Ascension. And the final example that's been given to us is if you're running Thousand Suns, then you can take a Demons Patrol detachment, but all of those demons have to have the Tzeentch keyword. Now, Games Workshop has stated in their Warhammer community article that these are just a few of the Battle Brother options available. Whilst it's just speculation at this time, I would wager that you'd probably be able to ally things like Imperial Guard and Space Marines together. It would be really weird if you could take Space Marines and Votann and Guard and Votann, but for some reason the Imperial Guard and the Adeptus Astartes don't like each other and won't work together. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I think there's a good chance you'll be able to ally various factions together that haven't been covered by Games Workshop yet. Likewise, whilst it does mention you'll be able to take a Brood Brothers Patrol, I would be really surprised if we don't see the return of G-Zilla cults being able to work alongside their Star Children Masters and for you to combine cult and Nid forces together. Of course, you've got all the various Chaos factions that can potentially be allied together. Chaos Soup is a long-standing tradition and is one of the main sources of power for the Chaos community. So it'd be kind of cool to see that return with a vengeance. Where we have no information and where we're completely blind is what's going to happen with factions like Necrons, Tau, and Orcs. Traditional Necron fluff would have it where Necrons can't ally with any of the younger, or should I say lesser races, but with the new Necron fluff giving them much deeper and fleshed out personalities, there is a chance that the dynasties might start using some auxiliaries from those younger races. Personally, I think that Tau and Orcs should be able to ally with pretty much any of the other factions out there. We all know that the Tau are a bunch of goody-goody two-shoes who love to hold hand, sniff pheromones, and try and work with anyone that they can get their hands on. And as for Orcs, there's actually some really cool fluff around that. There are Blood Axe commandos that regularly hire themselves out to other factions as extra muscle. You can probably expect the various Eldar factions to be able to ally together. Where it's going to get interesting is which factions the Eldar will also be able to ally with that are not pointy-eared. In the past, the Eldar and the Imperium have not had a very good working relationship, although that may change now that Rowboat Gulliman has got his big titty Eldar girlfriend. On the other hand, traditionally, the Tau and the Eldar have been able to ally together in older editions of Warhammer 40k. This was because the Eldar saw the Tau as a race with great potential and one that hadn't been corrupted by the darkness that is the Warhammer 40k universe. However, things have changed a lot since 7th edition when this fluff was kind of prevalent. The Tau have shown themselves to be a lot more of a darker race than expected, with the Ethereals pretty much enslaving everyone with their tasty pheromones, and also the Eldar seem to have cooled quite a lot on the Tau relationship. There's also the fact that the Tau had a really bad run-in with the Dark Elder, and that has generally coloured their perception of the Eldari as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see if GW acknowledges this fluff and has it represented in the new Battle Brothers and Allied rules. A lot of this is, of course, speculation. Right now, the only information we know for sure is what you can see on your screen, the Battle Brother rules and the examples that Games Workshop's given. But it is a hell of a lot of fun to have a guess at what kind of allies we think will emerge in the upcoming rule set. I normally wait till the end of the video to ask for people to comment, but this seems like a pretty natural place to put it. If you've got any cool ideas for allies, put it down in the comment section below. But if allies are coming back into Warhammer 40k, what is good about that? One of the best things about allies in 40k is it does give a lot of opportunity for cool armies to be created. Being able to create really cool armies, like a feudal guard force being led by a giant big knight, is really fluffy and looks great on the tabletop as well. Likewise, allies allow players to recreate some of their favourite moments from the lore. Do you want to have some Armageddon Steel Legion fighting alongside some Black Templars and recreate your favourite Hell's Reach moments? You can do that now and not just be limited to narrative play, but also do it in match play as well. From a competitive point of view, allies can be a really valuable and important resource for those factions that are struggling. For example, right now, Adeptus Mechanicus are kind of struggling, and that army really could do with a bit of a power boost. One way that they could do that is by plugging a knight into their army. Chucking a knight into a list has always been a viable way of just adding a good power boost to your force. The problem is that in 9th edition, it's cost you quite a lot of CP in being able to do that. Under the new Arcs of Omen attachment, Adeptus Mechanicus players will have more CP than ever, and it won't cost them any to include an Imperial Knight in their force. The other way that allies can be very important is to help cover glaring weaknesses in certain factions. Take a look at Adeptus Custodes. They are an elite fighting force, but they often struggle to have many bodies on the tabletop. Their models are also very expensive, which can mean that when you need to have a unit that's just going to sit back and hold your backfield objective, you've got to dedicate 150 points for a little unit of Custodian Guard just to sit there, twiddle their thumbs, play cards, and hold an objective. But suddenly, if you could ally some Guard and Custodes together, that would allow the Custodes to get some cheap bodies on the battlefield. These bodies could be used to free up those Custodian Guards who were holding the backfield objective, and instead they can push forward and be an aggressive force instead. Or they could be used as cheap action monkeys, again freeing up the Custodian units to do what they do best and to slay the enemies of the Emperor. One of the most interesting points about these Battle Brother rules, especially the ones that we've seen so far, is the implication that any Imperial faction will be able to ally in with the Votann. The Leagues of Votann are one of the most powerful factions in 40k right now, and giving all Imperial factions access to those units is definitely going to give them a power boost. A great combination that comes to my mind is being able to combine Marine infantry with Votann heavy support. The strength of the Space Marines has always been their really efficient and effective infantry that can often have access to really flexible and varied loadouts. Even something as simple as an intercessor will often be able to go toe-to-toe easily with the line infantry of another faction, and if not outshoot it, then beat it to a bloody pulp in combat. On top of this, many Marine chapters have access to some really powerful specialized combat units, such as the Blood Angels and their Sanguinary Guard. However, the Adeptus Astartes has always struggled in the armor department. Outside of Dreadnoughts, they really don't have much to write home about. But imagine if your Marines were suddenly able to go into battle with a Hecaton land fortress supporting them. Now you've plugged a serious gap in that faction and you've given it a hell of a power boost. As difficult as it is to admit, maybe even Guard would benefit from allying in some Votann. Guard has always traditionally struggled with close combat. Our Rough Riders pack a hell of a punch, but they're fragile. Because they're not infantry, they can't breach through walls, and they are kind of expensive. Likewise, if you take a look at our Bulgrin, they're tanky, but they're kind of slow, and also they don't actually do a lot of damage output, they can just take a punch to the face. But if you wanted to plug that gap and fix that problem, you could ally in some Votann Berserkers, and suddenly you've got a unit which has got great damage output, and it's got better maneuverability because it can breach through walls, and you've also got transport options for it that are pretty decent as well with the Sagittars. We've not even covered other Imperials like the Custodes or the Adeptus Mechanicus and how they might interact with the Diggy Hole boys, but I am certain there are several tasty combos to be uncovered. Little side note here, one of the most competitive ways of running your Votann right now is an army list that fits entirely within a single patrol detachment. Just food for thought. So if that's the good about the Battle Brothers, what is the bad? The first thing to mention is we don't know how these rules are going to work with your army-wide abilities you get if you don't soup and you take a mono faction. For example, in the Guard, if you just take a pure Astra Militarum army, you get the ability for your orders to splash out to multiple units. Likewise, for Marines, you get access to your super doctrines if you take a pure chapter force. It may very well be that you can ally multiple armies together, but if you do, you would lose access to these faction super abilities. If that's the case, it's certainly going to provide an interesting conundrum for many players. Do you ally in those powerful Votann units? But if you do, are you going to fundamentally alter how your army plays? And is it even going to feel like you're still playing with your Black Templars or your Ultramarines or your Guardsmen? It might be that many players are going to have to carefully weigh up the pros and cons of allying armies together. However, on the other side, we don't know if you will lose your army special rule. It very well may be the case that you can ally things together and you do not lose any of your super abilities. If I was a betting man, I would probably say that they're going to make it so that you don't lose your army-wide abilities. The vibe I'm getting from Arcs of Omen is that GW wants to start taking some of the restrictions off and make it more fun to build lists and design your armies. They don't want to be having players to make hard decisions. They just want to give them the freedom to create the armies that they want to run. Having allies break super doctrines kind of contradicts that whole vibe that they've been giving off with Arcs of Omen, but quite frankly, we just don't know yet. This is going to have to be a wait and see. My other main issue with the Battle Brothers rules is well, I'm just going to say it. The Votann cash grab is kind of obvious. I'm all for Games Workshop making money and running themselves as a business. I mean, at the end of the day, they got to do what they got to do. But this does feel kind of forced, and it's especially going to feel out of place if it turns out that these are all of the Battle Brother rules we're going to get for the Imperium, and that you won't be able to ally Guard and Marines together, but you'll be able to put Votann with both those factions. That will just seem really, really unusual, and I bet that's going to leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I do think that with the Votann rules being so powerful, you're going to find a lot of players picking up a cheeky patrol of Votann to plug into their army and give it a big boost. I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, it's just going to start feeling a bit weird if every game I go into, someone's allied some Votann into it. I've had a lot of criticisms to level at 9th edition, but one of the things that I think Games Workshop has absolutely done 110% correctly has encouraged mono-faction forces. Mono-faction armies just look better on the tabletop. It's as simple as that. They look more cohesive and they look like a genuine fighting force. And it always seems like when people bring allies into their army, that their main army gets all the beautiful painting skill and the allies just get a quick hack job so they can be chucked on the tabletop as quickly as possible. There's going to be nothing more jarring than seeing a beautifully painted Custodes army and then a badly painted 3-color minimum Hecaton land fortress that's just been slapped in alongside them in a completely different color scheme. But if that's what's bad about allies and Battle Brothers, what is the downright ugly? Well, the thing is, for every player that brings their cool feudal guard army led by an Imperial Knight, you've got 3 or 4 power gamers who are just going to mash together the most horrible stuff possible to absolutely curb stomp people on the tabletop. In case you weren't around for the dark days of 7th edition, one of the things that truly broke 40k and made it so Games Workshop had to do a hard reset was allies. Invisible Death Stars and Taldar, that's an alliance of Tal and Eldar, seriously trigger my PTSD. Back in 7th edition, I cannot tell you how many times I would go to a tournament and I would just have to slog through game after game after game where I'm the only person turning up to the event with a mono faction and everyone else has just got allied filth after allied filth, and I just get to the end of the event and I'm just completely and utterly exhausted. The reason why allies break 40k is because it makes the game even harder to balance. There are already so many moving parts in 40k and so many broken and bullshit combinations. And that's in an edition where people can't soup together different factions. Can you imagine some of the combinations that people are going to be able to come up with if they're allowed to take the most broken stuff from multiple different armies? Now, I know what some of you are saying, but Mordian Glory, that's the competitive scene. That won't be a factor in the normal games that people play against each other. Well, unfortunately, even though competitive 40k is a smaller part of the community, it leads the way and it absolutely influences the rest of the game. This has always been the way, and it's because match play provides a cohesive rule set so that everyone is playing on the same page. Don't forget, Games Workshop has been updating competitive play more than any other part of their game system during 9th edition. That's why we have these seasons and these cycles with things like Warzone Nephilim, Nakmund, and now we've got Arcs of Omen. What almost killed 40k in 7th edition wasn't the competitive scene being absolutely cutthroat and toxic. It was the fact that that mentality, the idea of getting net lists and bringing the most powerful stuff quickly leaked into and infected the normal gameplay of 40k, what you would call the casual scene. I cannot tell you the number of times I would go on forums like Daka, Bolter and Chainsaw, or even Warseer and see post after post after post of new player to 40k, just had my first game, got absolutely smashed, no idea what I could have done. Or I'm a returning player to 40k and I just tried to play a game and it feels like I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I got absolutely curve stomped. I just want to quit and never get my models out ever again. I could be worrying about nothing, and I am happy for you guys to disagree with me and say, Mordian, you are saying the sky is falling, there's nothing to worry about. But I'm just concerned that with the fact that we've got this new detachment that lets people min-max to their heart's content, people being able to bring armies of renown, although I do know those are being curtailed slightly, but there's still some of them out there. And we've also got these new allied detachments. I'm just concerned that the only hard check and balance that's in place from the 7th to 8th edition reset is now the rule of 3. If GW lifts the rule of 3 as well, we are truly back to the dark days of utter broken netlist spam armies. But those are just my thoughts on the new allies attachment and Battle Brothers. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you worried about allies, or are you really excited for what cool armies and combinations you're going to be able to come up with? If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button like GW smashing their own balance apart, and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. If you've really enjoyed today's video and you want to go the extra mile, please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. One of the big perks you get for being a channel member or Patreon supporter is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server. It is always popping off in the MG Discord. You'll find someone to talk to you about tactics, memes, hobbying, painting, or even get some army list advice. We've got a lot of really experienced members in that community and some absolute characters as well. So if that sounds like a ton of fun or a viable resource for you to draw upon, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter and getting yourself in that Discord server. And I'd just like to take a moment now and say a thank you to the latest channel members. So a big thank you to Apsalar, Sean Statsney, Martin Francis, A Nameless Name, Stephen Smith, Range 85, Dave Ingram, Aaron Smetzer, and Quark 007. I also want to shout out the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a big thank you to John Thacker, Joseph Crystal, Alex McDonough, Husky601, Eric Jackson, and Josh S. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt, proper thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly and utterly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you and an 07 down in the comment section for Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tequal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Soulfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and Sly Varney. Massive thank you to all of you guys. Your generous and ongoing support makes a really big difference. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.